Hey guys, Tom Barclay here. I've just been to Ange Postecoglou's press conference previewing Man United on Sunday, and some good news at long last on an injury point of view for Ange. He's got quite a lot of players back either now or imminently, which is absolutely wonderful news from his perspective after a long, hard, cold winter of just so many players being missing. I did a video last week of which quite a few new subscribers came along as a result of that video, but if you haven't checked it out yet, it basically outlines how his points about Spurs' injury crisis are valid in the sense that the statistics prove that they have actually had more than 25% worse amount of injuries than any other English club competing in Europe this season, from a cumulative 213 absentees across their 39 games, which is 44 worse than the next worst off, which is Arsenal. So if you haven't seen that video, go check it out. But in the meantime, let's go through the main lines from this press conference. So start off with the really positive news is Guglielmo Vicario is back, the goalkeeper who sustained a fractured ankle all the way back in November 23rd when they beat Man City 4-0, and that absolutely amazing result and performance from Postecoglou's Spurs, which kind of is the main reason for fans keeping the faith really around Postecoglou. That game proved that when he's got a fully fit squad, what he is capable of producing. Obviously since then it's been a completely different story, and a lot of fans are sort of pointing out that there were poor results even before the injury crisis began, such as Crystal Palace and Ipswich and more. So it's not as simple as saying, well, that was just one great result, now they've got injuries, it's all been downhill from there. But there is also a lot to be said for that particular argument, which obviously Postecoglou has made quite a lot, particularly in the last recent weeks. But Vicario back, and he talked about how much they've sort of missed him, particularly his leadership. Remember, Vicario is one of the leadership group. Obviously, Sonny's the captain, but there's a sort of vice-captaincy group of Romero, Maddison and Vicario, all of which they've missed in recent weeks. So when it comes to being under the cosh, as they've been in lots of games, not having those key figures, and he talked about Maddison as well, during this period has been difficult. And you can say what you want about them individually, about whether you think they are captaincy or vice captaincy material, whatever you might think. Clearly they are influential figures within this team and in the dressing room, and not having them around is always going to have an effect on how the team plays. And on that note, Maddison is also apparently good to go. I got the sense listening to all of his press conference, because a lot of it was dominated by injuries, particularly the open section, which is the video I'm doing right now, talking about those the sort of non-embargoed section. I got the sense that Vicario is probably very likely to start against Man United. Maddison's probably the next one who is most likely to start, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was on the bench. But either way, after this, I think it's a calf problem, hasn't it been, for Maddison in recent weeks? He is apparently good to go, and there's a good chance of him playing. And I think they've missed him. I know even when he was fit, it wasn't like he was playing every week, and often he was on the bench. But I think in recent weeks, there's been a lack, for my money, of ambition from the midfield. It's been too easy to play through, and I'm not saying bringing Maddison coming into that will really shore things up. He's not that kind of player, but there has been a lack of maybe bravery with the ball to try and make things happen, particularly in the last couple of games. And as difficult as a fixture away to Villa and away to Liverpool are, that was one of the disappointing things for me, and hopefully Maddison coming back can address that particular issue. Then after that, Destiny Udogie, as I wrote earlier this week, back in training. Wilson Odegaard's back in training, so's Brennan Johnson. And they could all be involved, albeit I get the sense that probably all of them, if they are involved, are more likely to be on the bench. I guess Udogie's got maybe a chance at left back, but based on what Andrew was saying, I'd feel like that was less likely. But a boost, no doubt, to have them back. And then after that, Werner's not far away. And then Romero, Van de Ven, of which I'm going to go into far more detail. That's probably what I'm going to title this video about, that particular centre-back pair and their situations, which has been obviously a massive bone of contention for fans during this period. So I'll go more specifically into them in a minute, but Romero, Van de Ven, Dominic Solanke, Richarlison, all sort of 2 to 3 weeks away, apparently, according to Ange. So actually, when you think about it, that Europa League game, which is on the horizon, March the 6th, I think the first leg, which will be an away tie, and I'll come on to the potential opponents in a minute. he may even have a fully fit squad for that. Like, theoretically, as long as they don't pick up any other injuries, pretty much all of them have got a chance, based on what he said, of being fit for that game. I mean, whether that actually comes to pass, I don't know, but there's a good chance of it. So, which is a real turnaround if that actually ends up being the case, given what they've been through in the last, pretty much the whole season, particularly the last 3 months. Anyway, on to Van de Ven and Romero specifically. So, first of all, on both of them, he has denied that there's been a setback with either of them. And he's also very much pushed back on the suggestion put to him by my Tottenham Way colleague, Dan Kilpatrick of the Evening Standard, about whether there was ever sort of a suggestion that potentially they could have either of them could have surgery. He's pushed back massively on that. That's never been on the agenda, and spoke quite at length about sort of refuting that suggestion as if no chance of it ever happening. And then on to Van de Ven specifically. So it's been a weird one, isn't it? Let's be honest. I mean, he's had hamstring problems, as we well know, all from, at Tottenham at least, from that Chelsea game, the infamous 4-1. Then this season, he's had issues, and then came back against Chelsea on December the 8th. Chelsea again seems to be that fixture, that team seems to be so pivotal. Chelsea at home specifically. It's been so pivotal to Ange's reign. He and Romero came back into the team, surprise selections. Romero limped out after 15 minutes with a new problem. He'd been injured with a toe problem and came off with a quad problem. He's been injured ever since. And Van de Ven picked up another hamstring problem. He did obviously come back for the Elfsborg game on January the 30th. And I remember asking Ange in the press conference the day before, when he suggested that Van de Ven would get minutes, do you feel completely sure that he won't basically, are you wary, or is it risky bringing him back in? And at the time, he was very much like, look, he's passed all the tests, he's been training for a while, we have to play him at some point. But obviously, things hadn't gone quite to plan. He came on, played the first 45 minutes, came off, and we haven't seen him since. And every week, it's been frustrating. It's been, the hope that he'd be back in, and he still hasn't been. So Ange has been, it was always going to be a big topic for us today, even though there's been positive injury news. What is going on with Van de Ven and Romero? So there were numerous questions on the pair of them. So I'll just go through some of the points that Ange made. So he said with Van de Ven, they're actually trying to do some different things with him. And they're even speaking to different people. He's even said that they are even speaking to some people outside of the club, trying to get as much information, as much sort of advice, I suppose, sort of medically, over his situation. To try, the whole goal, just to be fair to Ange, consistently, he said, during this last few weeks, I suppose, when Van de Ven hasn't been in the team and he's been asked about him, he's reiterated the point that it's about making sure when he comes back, he stays fit. And that's basically what they're looking at the moment. That's what he's saying. They're it's all about trying to ensure that when he comes back, he stays fit. So like I say, they've been even speaking to people outside the club, trying to get advice. He said it wasn't so much the injury, but it's the mechanics of his body. So they want to make sure they get it right, and it's about understanding his body. It just sounds like with Van de Ven, obviously his game is so based on speed. I mean, he's obviously a top quality technical player as well, but take his speed away and he's a good player, but he's a great player with his speed because of his recovery runs and the fact that he's basically quicker than any other defender and most players out there. But obviously with quick players, I don't know, I guess I'm slightly casting aspersions here, but there have been lots of examples of fast players over the years who've struggled once they've lost the pace or be more likely to pick up hamstring injuries. I mean, Michael Owen, off the top of my head, is a prime example of that, but there are others, Fernando Torres, loads of players. And so I guess the goal is to make sure that Micky has 23 now, that he's got a good 10 years ahead where he can be at his best possible level, which therefore means using that speed to its maximum without the risk of having these problems that he seems to be experiencing, particularly during his time at Tottenham. And he was asked whether Micky was frustrated, really. And he said he was frustrated, but they've had a chat about it, really. And it sounds like Ange said he wanted to keep going, which I'm presuming means he wanted to keep going after the Elfsborg game, as in keep playing. Because it very much feels like Postecoglou, at least the way he's presenting it, it's been his sort of intervention to stop risking these players from coming back too soon, because apparently there's a chance they could have played. They are sort of physically up to it, but at least on a one-off situation. But the risk is obviously heightened over making it worse and long-term doing damage, I suppose, to their bodies. So Van de Ven, it sounds like he wanted to come back and keep on playing, but seems to have been won round by Postecoglou's conversation with him about how basically it's about, getting 10 years out of his, at the top level, and in time this annoying sort of extra period of sort of 2-3 weeks, wherever it might end up being, which he wasn't hoping for and is very frustrating in the moment, will look insignificant in the future if it pays off. Is basically the argument. With Romero, it's a slightly different situation. I mean, Ange has used lots of phrases for Romero in recent weeks, and it's all been quite vague. Slow burner was one that we just you sort of got an idea of what it meant, but it was a bit vague. He said, look, it's a healing issue, basically, that hasn't healed up. This quad injury that he picked up against Chelsea just hasn't healed up as quickly as they'd hoped. But if it all goes well, his return should be imminent. So, I mean, he sort of spoke to Tottenham TV before the press conference, where he said sort of 2 to 3 weeks. He sort of said imminent here. It's a bit vague over exactly when he's back, but the idea is that the way Ange is sort of presenting it is that they aren't far away, but like I say, it's about making sure they stay fit once they come back. Anyway, so that's the sort of nuts and bolts of the Romero and Van de Ven situation. Hopefully that clears up things a bit better, because I know supporters are very, very frustrated over that particular pairing. Anyway, and on that note, so if that time frame is correct, then they should hopefully be fit for that first leg in the Europa League. So if you've noticed, so there are 4 possible teams that Spurs could play in their last 16 two-legged tie, which the first leg will be away from home because Spurs finished in the top 4. Obviously, this season, whilst Ange is talking about letting the league go to seed effectively, and talking about the importance of finishing well, let's be honest, any remote chance of success comes through the Europa League this season, both in chance of ending that 17-year drought for a trophy and also qualification for the Champions League. And if Spurs can retain, get their players back and sort of somehow get their form back, then they are definitely one of the biggest favourites for the competition. And with that in mind, having all those players back for that first leg would be an absolutely massive boost. So the 4 teams they could face are AZ Alkmaar of Holland, or the Netherlands, Galatasaray, who obviously they faced and lost quite convincingly to in the group stage, FC Midtjylland, if I pronounced that right, from Denmark, and Real Sociedad of San Sebastian in Spain, which would be lovely, as I've pointed out before. I'm sure everyone is sort of desperate for the journalists to get a nice trip to San Sebastian. But anyway, I guess the fans would go as well. Anyway, there were games played. The first leg of their ties were played on Thursday night, so we've got a bit of an idea of probably what's likely to happen. So AZ Alkmaar won 4-1 at home to Galatasaray. So unless Galatasaray have an absolutely storming second leg at home, you're probably likely to see AZ's come through. And Troy Parrott, the old Spurs player, scored for AZ last night, so that'll be one to watch. And then Real Sociedad won 2-1 away to Midtjylland, meaning that the San Sebastian dream sort of lives on. It remains to be seen, whoever gets through in those respective ties, which team Spurs will face. I think it might even be Man United might face the other team, however it works out. But we'll wait to see on that front. Just back to Vicario, he was saying that he basically was number one and he remains number one when he got injured. He obviously played his best game of his career really at the Etihad, and though Anthony Kinski's been signed and done fairly well with some ropey moments at times, including the opener against Villa, Vicario, not only from his ability but also from his the aforementioned leadership element of his game, means that Ange very much sees him as the number one still. But he praised Kinski for his reaction after conceding that horrible opener against Villa. To be fair, he did make some good saves after that. And he also talked about if United, he sort of talks about Amorim, who you could see as a bit of a kindred spirit to a certain extent. Ruben Amorim, in a different kind of way, seems pretty wedded to his 3-4-3 formation, even if early evidence at United seems this squad is not very fitting of the United squad. 9 wins in 20 games so far. But like Ange, with his sort of semi-puritanical approach to his style of football, albeit I would say in recent weeks they have tried to change it up, even if it hasn't worked. There's a similarity there, and Ange is very sure. It's very often that managers are very praiseworthy of their fellow managers, their fellow brethren in the management world. But he's very sure that if United stick by Amorim, that within 2 years they'll have progressed. And on this game, it's going to be an interesting one, isn't it? Because there's going to be a protest against the owners being organised by Change for Tottenham. I spoke to Jamie Coughlin, one of their representatives this week, about what they hope to achieve, because obviously, Spurs and ENIC have increased their shareholding marginally back in December, and despite all the chants, of which there are many, and particularly at the moment against Daniel Levy, against ENIC at the moment, there's been no sort of suggestion that would have shifted the dial on their wanting to own the club, historically at least. But you never know, I suppose, and that's the feeling behind Change for Tottenham and what they're planning on doing this ahead of this Man United game. So they are going to have a march towards the ground, I think to the West Stand ahead of kickoff. It's a 4:30 kickoff. I think they're starting at sort of 2:45, march to the ground, and there's going to be a sit-in after the game. They don't want to disrupt the actual match. They want to get behind the team, but after the game, they plan on the fans that are taking part in this protest to plan on having a sit-in after the game at the match to make their voices heard. So I guess we'll see what comes of that, and it could be another difficult day from Daniel Levy's point of view in terms of the chants that are directed in his way. The game itself. Just another point, actually, sorry, on Spurs this week. You may have missed this. It's a great story from Ali Gold of Football London, the great Ali Gold. A lovely story, mainly because it's kind of a funny story, really, given the injury situation that Spurs have been in, that they are looking to expand or extend the training complex at Tottenham, at Hotspur Way, including making a bigger and upgraded gym, but also a bigger an upgraded treatment room, which you can sort of insert your gag there after all the injuries they've faced this season. But I suppose, all jokes aside, Spurs, a big part of their ability to sell the club to up-and-coming players is their world-class facilities, and as good as it's been since it opened in 2012, and there have been tweaks here and there, sports science and modern football approaches to health and well-being and looking after players moves on apace every year, really, and they want to stay up to date with that. So and given the injuries they've had this season, any extra help on that front to improve that situation in the future is surely welcome. So back to the game. I mean, it is probably one of the least least impressive Big Six, for one of the traditional Big Six games we've seen in many years. I mean, Spurs are 14th, United are 13th. I mean, at Spurs, I do feel, even though it's not as simple as just injuries, the crux of it is also injuries, as I've pointed out before, in my opinion. Whereas United, I don't know, it's a bit of a different story. I'm not quite convinced, even though if Ange is, that Amarim is the man based on if he's going to stick to this one style. But look, maybe it's going to be a lot of pain for them to begin with, and it's going to get easier once the players get to grips with it, or they go through a big squad churn in the summer. But yeah, obviously neither team in good fettle, particularly in the league or just generally this season. And my colleague Dave Kidd wrote a great piece on sort of the theme around this game and where the two teams are at and expectations for two massive clubs, particularly United. And I don't know, it's another chance for Tottenham, isn't it, to sort of trying to change the narrative after such a difficult week in the Cups and this season generally. But I don't know, I mean, it's a weird one. It feels important, but is it actually important? I mean, I guess they can't keep losing in the league. Like that's just not sustainable. But also the league is kind of gone. I suppose it's better, the best he could hope for really is some sort of push, to be honest, to the top half of the table, I would say, before the end of the season, which is a pretty forgettable season, whatever they do. So, yeah, it all seems to be sort of building towards that Europa League fixture. And whilst it's a pretty glamour league match on paper, it really doesn't speak to the situation the two clubs are in. But anyway, I don't know. Let me know what your thoughts are on this particular game and how important it really is to Tottenham's season. But we'll see. On to the team itself. I think for once, Ange's got quite a lot of options he could choose from. You've got, I think obviously Vicario, comes back into goal. Fullbacks, I get the sense that Udogi's more likely to start on the bench. But so I'm going to go with Porro and right back, Spence left back. But I guess there's always the outside option that Udogie could come back in. Centre backs, Danzo, I presume, will play. And then it's an interesting one. I think he'll probably stick with Archie Gray. He just seems to always want to play him in the defence. I keep thinking, is this the chance that he maybe moves into midfield? And maybe it will be, and Davis comes in. But I would not be surprised if it is Gray at centre back again, maybe Davis on the bench. Then in midfield, he's got lots of options. I think maybe there's a chance that Maddison starts. We'll see on that one. So I'm thinking maybe Bergvall, Bentancur, Maddison, Bissouma. There's a whole conversation to be had about him, isn't there? With the way that he's in and out of the team. When he does play, he comes off. When he doesn't play, he is involved off the bench. Doesn't seem to be completely convinced on that front from Postecoglou's point of view. There's obviously Sarr available as well. The midfield feels like a big conversation to be had, given that it's one of the least hit out of all the areas of the team, albeit still Maddison's been missing, Bentancur's had a suspension, and it just seems to be far too easy to play through, particularly in recent weeks, and that's something that I really hope they improve on at the weekend. And then up front, I think it's likely to be Kulusevski Tell, hopefully through the middle from the beginning. He seems like he fitted better there in the game the other day, and obviously took his goal really, really well. And then Son, I'd like to see back out wide left, and hopefully he can pick it up, because the last two games have been poor from his point of view, after what I thought was a bit of an upturn in his form in the few games before then, in what has been, let's be honest, a pretty underwhelming season from the captain. But hopefully, this week they've had a couple of days off at the start of the week to recharge. They've had no midweek fixture for only the second time since August, I think I worked it out to be, which for particularly players like Son, who play internationally and have long journeys to go on, it's been an absolutely grueling and relentless season, particularly the last few months, where they've been playing with a handful of first-team players, or sort of 9, 10, 11 first-team players in relentless matches. So hopefully they are in a better physical place, and they can take on a Man United team that looked very much at the best in the infancy of Amorim's project. At worst, a team that doesn't look suited at all to the way he wants to play, and hopefully Spurs can make the most of it, really. Anyway, let me know your thoughts, and I will speak to you. I might do another video ahead of the game. We'll see, and if I do, let me know. But I always want to know your thoughts, and let me know when your likely lineups and your thoughts ahead of Man United. Cheers, guys.